Hello and welcome back to Schamberger Labs. I'm still Rob Schamberger, and this week I thought I would talk a bit about work-life balance as an artist and also as a self-employed working from home person. What got me on wanting to talk about this, first, we kind of covered it in last week's episode of like when I was still working a day job full time, like a 40-hour-a-week job, I would still put in 50 to 60 hours a week on top of that, trying to improve my craft as an artist. And I know a lot, probably like the majority of even working artists out there are still doing that to some extent. Whether it's a full-time job so that they have insurance or of some sort coming in, or other sorts of needs in that area, or if it's just part-time to make ends meet. The other thing that made me want to talk about this was there was recently a thing going around where comic books especially were being called a side hustle. And it struck a nerve. It's something that I've run into my whole life with wanting to be an artist. Like growing up, being told that, either that's an impossible way to make a living, or that a nicer way of putting it, that I should have some sort of plan B in case that doesn't work out. AKA, I don't think it's going to work out for you. And honestly, yes, it is tough doing this. It's really hard, especially with a lot of digital options that are out there now. It's harder and harder to make a living as an artist. And I'm not saying this as like a woe is me type thing, or even that this job is harder than others. It's just a job unto itself. And that's the I guess the point I'm trying to get across, right? Like, it's a cool job, but it's still a job, as the song says. Like one of my day jobs, I had a coworker that said art cannot be a career, that it's only a hobby. And I just found that to be utterly ridiculous. Like this person specifically had just gotten a sleeve tattoo done. And I said, "Oh, did you get that done by a tattoo hobbyist or a tattoo artist?" Dunk. But I run into that a lot. And so here I just wanted to get across a bit like the real life job aspect of this. So first, is a career as an artist a hobby or a career? Well, it depends on how much you're spending versus how much you're making by IRS definition. If you earn more than you spend, it is income, so it is not a hobby. It's you're earning a profit, so it's not a hobby. And you also have, I think it's like 3 years to start making a profit, or else it's just designated as a hobby. They have to make those kinds of designations for write-off purposes, that sort of thing. But the majority of my art career, I have made more than I've spent. Sometimes it's been by like $100, or less even, probably on a couple of those years. But like it, even though it wasn't like covering my living expenses money, it wasn't like a full-time earning yet, it was still revenue being generated. So the next part of this is that as an artist, there's a few different ways to generate revenue. You can be a full-time employee as an artist, also known as a staff artist. There's various outlets for that. When you are doing that, most likely everything that you produce during hours on premises belong to the company that is employing you, the same way it is for any employee anywhere. That's one way. The next way, the demarcation here is whether you're a fine artist or a commercial artist. And this is a little bit in a gray area. This is just the definition I've heard. I don't know that it's like codified in law anywhere. Codified, I don't know. So the difference there is if someone is commissioning you to make something and they're paying you up front, and most likely that it is a work for hire scenario, meaning that they will retain ownership the same way as if you were a full-time employee for them of the work that's created. That is a commercial artist. Fine artist is where you are making the work up front and then finding a way to sell it afterwards. That is, for the most part, the camp that I fall into. I'm lucky enough to have an arrangement where I have creative autonomy with my work, and then WWE and I figure out ways afterwards to sell either the originals or the prints or both, or other uses of the art, like putting on products, the like. And then because I generate all of this up front, I then get a cut on the back end, as my current relationship is. And there are other outlets like that where you can do that. Now, say like the person drawing Spider-Man for Marvel, they're a commercial artist. They're given a script to draw, and it comes down to like what their relationship is with the writer on that book, as well as editorial on how much creative freedom they're getting, but also as an artist, they're putting a lot in there of themselves. But Marvel, of course, owns everything of that work. Although I know that at least with Marvel and DC, most other reputable publishers, they're able to sell the original art if it's hand done. A lot of it's done digitally now. There's, a lot of different avenues there. But as you can see, these are all professional relationships. These aren't side hustles. They're serious work to make serious money. Legitimate money. And then, we fall into like, well, it's not as regular or respected of work as, like, say, going into an office. Some artists, like staff artists, go into offices. Others have studios. I had a separate studio from where I lived for a long time. It just, in the last few years made more sense to work from home, especially with pandemic stuff. But I have had times where, like, I shared a working space with other creative people, and we had a co-working environment that way. My wife works from home as well, so we still have that. We just get to have our cats around now. So I don't see like that, right? Like a lot of office work is being done from home, especially during the pandemic, but since. So there's not a huge difference there. And then also like at the end of the day, like especially on the fine artist side, but just as much really on the commercial artist side, we are small business owners as artists. We have to do our bookkeeping and taxes and all of that stuff the same way that someone running a fulfillment operation out of their home or out of a separate office has to do, just like we do. And like, I don't know that it's incredibly harder work than some out there, right? Like physically, is this harder than digging ditches? No, absolutely not. And I actually have family that are in excavation and legitimately getting down in there with a shovel and digging ditches. And no, I don't work physically that hard. There can definitely be days where I am utterly drained at the end of the day. And a lot of that I've heard is because of the amount of concentration that goes into painting. Like if you think about it, like all the calculations that your brain has to make while you're driving. Controlling the wheel, controlling the gas, the brakes, being aware of what's happening 360 degrees around you, paying attention to what other cars are doing, all those different calculations that your brain does almost in the background. But that's also the reason why, say, with long distance drivers, there's a cap on how long they're allowed to legally drive and how much rest time they have to have because of how it affects their cognitive abilities. Same with pilots and flight staff. You know, they can time out on things. As an artist, I can speak to that. Again, completely like apple to orange, but both fruit comparison, where I feel like all the different calculations that my brain is doing in the background to paint, whether it's what color I'm choosing, the area that I want the paint to go in, the amount of water versus pigment if I'm working with watercolor, the amount of pressure I'm pushing the brush onto the paper. All of those calculations happening, like trying to foresee where the steps that I'm doing now will pay off down the line with a painting. Or with this Charlotte Flair piece that I'm working on, because I'm working with acrylic and going way more detailed on it than I typically do just by the nature of this painting. Looking at all the different layers, like where do I start on this painting, where do I finish, what types of brush strokes am I doing, all of that. And like here where I'm working on the WrestleMania logo, having as sharp of edges as possible, but also wanting it to look painted, you know, like I'm not going for photorealism on this painting. All of those calculations go in. If you're doing that for like 6 to 10 hours in a day, like I often do, it can be like completely exhausting. And like I had to learn to not like burn the midnight oil for myself, because I would be utterly useless at least for the next day, sometimes a couple of days after, and I would lose any advantage that I would have other, you know, instead of getting a good rest and coming back to the work. And I feel like I'm kind of like leaning into like defensiveness on this, and yes, that does happen. That is an emotion that I feel when I talk about this, because I take it so seriously. And through so much of my life, there were so many people that did not that may have not had the faith in me to pull this off, or that looked down on this career, especially until like things with WWE took off. But even after, like, there was someone close to me that asked, like, "Hey, when are you gonna start painting something that people actually care about?" Yeah. Like it, and that all comes back to like what I'm learning in therapy. Hey, take a drink. I mentioned therapy. That like, I don't need so much external validation, and that I guess we can kind of jump into imposter syndrome here, which is something that a lot of artists struggle with. This definitely speaks to that. And okay, so the basis of imposter syndrome is that what you're doing is not legitimate, and anyone that negatively criticizes you knows what they're talking about, and anyone who compliments you does not. It's a very vicious cycle to fall into. There's a lot of confirmation bias that happens. I still get it to a degree, not as much as I did until about like 2-3 years ago. Therapists at that point brought up to me, like, first, like, asked me how many billion-dollar corporations I'm currently working with. I had to stop to think to answer, which means that I had to stop to think to answer. Yes, this is a bit of a brag, but it's my reality that I live with. And he said, like, would all of these corporations be putting the faith in you that they do if your work wasn't worth it? Which I definitely had to answer, like, no, of course they wouldn't. And hey, maybe my work is good to a degree. See, the way I just even framed it there. And part of that is like this Midwestern humility. You can't say nice things about yourself. I don't know where that originates from, but it's so a thing. And then also the way that you invalidate and delegitimize anyone that says anything nice about your work or about you personally. Are these people not worthy of having an opinion? Do you really, like, how informed do their opinions have to be? And then going to the confirmation bias side of things, what you're looking for is someone saying something negative to confirm how you feel about yourself. At least how I felt and often still feel about myself. And that's hard, right? Like, I can have sometimes a dozen or 100 people say something very positive about my work, and there can be 1 or 2 people that say something pretty negative. Those are the only ones I pay attention to. That sucks. I publicly apologize to all the people that do say nice things that maybe I don't properly thank you enough. I do appreciate it, and I am learning to appreciate it even more. To validate your opinion, because you are correct and you do matter. And the people that, especially like publicly, want to say something negative, they're really speaking to themselves and what they're dealing with in their lives. And for the most part, right? Like, sometimes there are very legitimate criticisms that you can levy at someone else. But I feel that overall, when you run into someone making a point to be negative, that they're actually speaking about something that's happening in their life at that moment. And instead of then, arguing back with them, which is a trap I fall into too often, I shouldn't I should just let it go. And for the most part, I do good at that. I, like, on social media, mute and block liberally. I have no problem with that. So then, what I deal with there, and here's another thing, a statistic I learned back at a day job. If someone has a negative customer service experience, they're likely, and this is pre-social media, early internet. The statistic might even be like like widely distributed internet. That someone that has a negative customer service experience is liable to tell, on average, 11 people about their negative experience that they had. Someone who has a good experience is at most only going to tell about 3 people, normally less. So on the internet, especially, when you run into negative criticism, because it's so easy for the human brain to go negative, that those comments that you see are usually it. And the positive ones, there's actually more people with that sentiment. These are just the ones that felt comfortable enough to be positive publicly. Like in the early days of the internet, we used to worry about the cockroach problem, which is if you see one cockroach, you have 100 in your house, right? Is the saying. And so if you saw one person being negative in like the replies, you thought like, oh, there's way more people that feel this. And it's actually the opposite. If you get a couple negative responses, that's actually it. Yet otherwise, it's people that just moved on, which is fine. Like, let them. And then the people that took a moment to actually say something positive, I feel like there's far more people that have that sentiment that just, for whatever reason, don't articulate it. So if you do struggle with imposter syndrome, and a lot of people do, for a lot of different root reasons. It's a symptom thing, not a cause thing, but it is a symptom that can exacerbate other problems. But if you run into that, know that it's likely not as bad as it seems. What you're feeling around it is real and valid to you, but do try to take a sidestep and look at it from a logical perspective as well. Easy for me to say, pal. And try to approach it that way as well. So, why get into the arts? We all have a lot of reasons for that. It's a cool way to make a living, right? Like, at the end of the day, I get to do this for a living. I get to be self-directed because I'm self-employed. And I'm ideally bringing beauty into the world as part of my life. Like, that's amazing. And so to younger artists or artists on their way up, and I think I got into this last week as well, but like, really look at what you're doing as a business. That is the way to succeed. Even if the people around you, the society around you, may not look at it that way, that is what we're doing. And especially when you start dealing with higher end clients, they'll be really impressed by your business acumen. Put as much effort into your art that you're making as also learning about business, whether that's the financial side of things, whether it's negotiation techniques, whether it's proper email etiquette, um, and other business relationships, right? Like I've got my printer's office, Alpha Graphics of Kansas City, that I work with, maintaining that relationship. They're very integral to everything that I do. And like, being a good tenant for your landlord where you may have a studio space at, or if you get into, like print fulfillments like I do, I've got an assistant, so I have to stay on top of all the different things that go into having an employee, like doing payroll and that stuff. And then there's also marketing, whether it's traditional ad buys. I don't really do that anymore. It doesn't quite work with my specific product, but it is something that I'm always keeping an eye on. But also social media practices, my email newsletter that I do. This very video right here is a part of marketing. I went and taught myself how to shoot and produce and edit videos. The Schamberger Labs videos don't have stellar production on them, but Canvas to Canvas does have quite a bit that goes into it. Those are all skills that I taught myself because they're all in service to the art. Man, there's like so many things that if I do it well, you don't even know about, but may come up from time to time, like shipping internationally. There have been some regulation changes, so I had to stop doing that, but trying to constantly stay on top of that landscape so that I can start at some point in the future distributing internationally again. There's so many things that they don't teach you in art class. And so for the young artists out there, I can't stress enough that the business side of things is just as important as keeping on top of your craft. There's probably 3 to 4 hours at the beginning of my day that is on the administrative business side of all of this before I even start painting. And then, like spending several hours that way. That is a thing that I highly recommend as far as scheduling out your day. Have times where you're focused on the analytical, and then take a break, like normally a lunch break, and then come back and work on the artistic side of your brain. Obviously, there's going to be phone calls or pressing emails that may come in here and there, but for the most part, on a day-to-day basis, you're going to just want to focus your mental energies in the right direction. I feel that works really well as a creative person. Also, if you're working from home, but even if you have a studio, don't eat at your desk. And the reasoning for that is it's not restful. You're never letting yourself come down, letting your brain come down. Have a separate space where you take a break. I try to do as little work as possible on the couch in the living room because that is a separate space from where I work. I've got 2 different areas in the house that I do my work from, and then the rest of the house is where I live out of. And even when I take a break, I don't break in the studio. There was me trying to think if I have, like, not more than 5 times. I just don't eat at my desk. I find somewhere else to do that so that I can let myself shift mindset, especially when it comes to lunch, and then come back to work. Finding that balance. Because to wrap all of this up, this is work that we do as artists. It is legitimate. It is valid. It is real. We do a service to ourselves and to our communities by bringing something that's wonderful into other people's lives. And if we treat it seriously, that'll come through in the work. Thank you guys for hanging out with me again this week. I'm really excited with where the painting is going now. I didn't really get into it, but just finished up the entrance way on this, and now we're going to start getting into the really exciting stuff on the painting. And I'm super stoked for that from here on out. Thank you. If you want to see these videos a week early, as well as getting a lot of other cool advantages like winning a free painting every week, go to robschamberger.substack.com. If you want to see and ideally purchase the artwork that I make, you can go to schambergerlabs.com. On the social media, where I will do my best to not mute or block you, it is at Rob Schamberger on both Twitter and the Instagram. And please do a Roman Reigns and smash the like and subscribe here on YouTube. And I will see you next week. Thank you. I love you.